Welcome to Threads of Sustainability, where you get to hear the passionate, informative, and engaging conversations of creatives, makers, manufacturers, and producers from all over the globe. We explore what sustainability can look like in the quilting, fiber, and textile world, and I'm your host, Bridget O'Flaherty, also known as the Sustainable Quilter. I'm so glad that you've joined me this week. This week I'm talking with somebody about doing memory quilts and t-shirt quilts, which is really lovely, and it's a great conversation. She has a really long history with it, and we get into some really interesting ideas. And one of the ideas that I am excited to talk to you or to share with you is about what creating and making for people gives to ourselves, to our souls, to how it feeds us, and the importance of doing that kind of thing creatively for our own personal gain and personal experiences. It really does contribute to our own well-being, and it is really touching again on the idea of sustainability, starting with the individual and starting with feeding ourselves. We are creating things for other people, but really the feedback that we get from gifting and giving and being creative feeds us in a way that that kind of joy spreads. And I think that that's a really awesome thing to experience and explore. And I really loved having this conversation with Cathy to kind of talk to her about that impact of her being creative and how it feeds her and how it keeps her going. Like, she gets just as much out of the making and the giving as the person who's receiving it, which is such a wonderful, just a wonderful concept. I really like that. And I think that that's a really important part of sustainability that we need to give ourselves credit for, that we are feeding our own selves so we can do more for other people. I think that's an important thing. Anyway, here's the conversation. Enjoy. Welcome to Threads of Sustainability. I'm so glad that you joined me here today, and I'm excited to talk to you. Today, I've got Cathy Saul with me, and she is a quilter located in Newmarket, Ontario. And talking to her the other day a little bit about doing t-shirt quilts and memory quilts, I put out a call out on Facebook trying to find somebody who does this on a regular basis and wanting to know more about it. So Cathy and I had a little chat, and we wanted to talk to you a little bit more about what she's doing. And I'm going to let you introduce yourself a little bit more, Cathy, and tell us a little bit about kind of how you got started and into the idea of upcycling fabrics and t-shirts and that kind of stuff.
So we've been a green household since I was young, before anybody ever heard of compost. My grandparents did, and my mother was very frugal. And I had 5 children, so I collected a lot of flannel from those babies. And a dear friend of mine late in life had a baby, and I thought I would make her a quilt. I had not a great deal of experience sewing. My mom was a seamstress professionally, so the sewing machine was not something I got to use very often. Someone had given me for my last child a quilt made of recycled receiving blankets, flannel receiving blankets. And I was struck by how soft it was, how lovely it was to repurpose those fabrics. Mm-hmm. And when my friend had her baby later in life, my children, quite grown, I think, I still had a pile of flannel. And I thought, what a nice thing that I could do for her to make a quilt out of these leftovers. And so I did. And she quite liked it, and he quite liked it. And I was sold on the whole concept.
Nice. So you're like right from the beginning, pretty much, you've been upcycling and repurposing.
As much as I can. I try to have pretty close to a zero waste studio.
Nice.
My scraps go either into scrap quilts, or if they're too small for that, they go into beds for pets.
Nice.
Often the same customer that's getting a t-shirt quilt will get a pet bed of the scraps of those t-shirts, if I can organize that well enough. One of my sons does some volunteer work at a dog rescue.
Okay.
So pet beds go there as well. And I keep lots of things that end up in quilts.
Okay. So that's so interesting. So now you're kind of focusing more on the t-shirt part of things. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Some time after I had started quilting, some colleague at work had baby clothes, and she was only having one baby, and she wanted to preserve those memories. So she brought me a few bags full of baby clothes and asked me to please make a quilt from them. And I had never done such a thing. I didn't know interfacing from anything else, and bought the wrong stuff and made hideous mistakes. But she loved the quilt in the end.
So, and tell me, is it all different fabrics, or we're using the same kind of fabric?
Oh my goodness. This is the challenge, because baby clothes are often knits and stretch. Mm-hmm. And some of her things were denim, and some of the things were cotton. There was every fabric you could imagine.
Okay.
And of course, it was an enormous design challenge.
Yeah.
Because you have to use what you have in front of you. And no one buys their baby clothes thinking, oh, these will coordinate well when I need a quilt. Luckily, much of it was pink. And she was a big fan of pink and had asked me to use some polka dotted pink fabric to make some sashing and on the back. So that's what pulled it all together. T-shirt quilts came after that, just friends and acquaintances and customers I had. People collect stacks of T-shirts and they grow out of them, or they no longer want to wear them, or they're worn, but they're meaningful. Yeah. They are from a concert you went to, or from an experience you had at summer camp. And so there's lots of life left, often in big pieces of those fabrics. Mm-hmm. So they make very warm quilts that have a great story to them. Yeah. One of my sons was going to university, my last son, the one who really likes his quilts. And we were cleaning his room to pack for him to go. And we found all of these T-shirts. He's a drummer by nature and was going to school for music. So there were band T-shirts and scouting T-shirts and soccer T-shirts and all his favorite things. Mm-hmm. And all he said to me was, Mom, my favorite color, as you know, is yellow. So we have to put yellow in this quilt. Nice. Again, trial and error, and best I could do, made him a double-sized quilt for his bed at university. And he loved it and still uses it to this day. Oh, he does. That's so awesome. Yeah, it's such a wonderful part of doing these types of quilts, these memory quilts, becomes this long legacy, and it's steeped in this history and tradition and of quilting for one thing, but also of these memories of whatever life events we've gone through. And then we get to carry that forward with us. But then they also become quilts that go like to the next person in our lives, and that's the sustainability connection right there, is not only in the material savings and use, but the stories that are behind it. And, they're going to meet people who see these quilts and wonder what the stories are. And you get to then have these connections and stories behind all these quilts. One of my very favorite memory quilts it's a sad story, but it has a happy ending. A young woman reached out on social media looking for a quilter. She had lost her husband. Okay. And she had a young daughter who was only 4. And the daughter had only been 2 when her father passed away. And she wanted something of her husband's for her daughter to have. So she brought me an enormous box of his clothes. And we worked together with a local printing company to print, I think, 30 photographs. Wow. And so we made a double-sized quilt that had her father's favorite dress shirts and his jeans and photographs of her with her dad. Wow. It was a Christmas present for her when she was 4. She was a single mom now, so she had to bring her daughter. So we had to have all these conversations in code when she brought me the fabrics and when she would bring me the photographs. But she sent me 2 photographs of her daughter with the quilt on her bed, looking absolutely blissful. And that was a fabulous, fabulous outcome for me of a memory quilt. One of the most special. What a beautiful story. Yeah, it's just amazing
You just get to have these great stories and these great connections to people, and bringing sort of like a giant hug in the
Yes.
quilt, you know?
Yes. Quilts are that anyway. And when they have stories, and especially when they have things that belonged to someone else, then that hug is from that person as well as whoever may have gifted it to you.
When we were talking earlier, you were telling me that you travel around and you carry your hand quilting with you. And so you start talking to them about what it is you do. Tell us more about that.
I think I was coming up on a deadline, and my husband and I are musicians. So we go out a couple of times a week at least to open mic events. They're mostly fairly informal, often in a restaurant or a bar. So lighting becomes an issue.
Sure.
But I wanted a project to finish. And a lot of time I'm sitting and listening, but my hands can be busy while I'm listening. And I'm a hand quilter. I often finish my quilts by hand. So I got to taking them with me. And now it's quite accepted. New people, often everyone wants to see what it is that I'm working on. And people do ask, and often, oh, gee, I have a pile of t-shirts. Do you think you could do that for me? Or, so-and-so has just lost their mother, and I know they're looking for someone to make a quilt out of their clothes. So it becomes a conversation about what I'm doing and why, and what might be a next step for somebody. It's not a lost art, but only because we are a little bit militant in keeping it out there in the public.
And that was the question that I was going to ask is are the people that you're talking to, do they understand, do they know what quilting is, or are they kind of being reintroduced to it? Or is it something that you're kind of spreading the word about what quilting is?
Occasionally someone will say, I remember my grandmother quilting, or I remember my mother quilting, but most often it is, my goodness, that's fascinating. What exactly are you doing? And so I get to show them and tell them all about it. People have lots of questions and want to know, but they can see it right there in front of them. Yeah. So it piques their interest. So I get to talk about something I love with new people.
That's so great. And I also love that they're then they're being introduced to quilting, but it's also a sustainable type of quilting where you're upcycling and it's got that environmental piece to it as well. So they're being introduced to quilting without it being a consumer-based product, which is an interesting thing, that's their first taste of quilting. And I think that's really, really awesome. So talk to me a little bit. You do a lot of charity and donation quilts. Talk to me about some of those situations. So which charities are you donating to right now?
Oh my goodness. So a dear friend of mine is the director of a program out of Sunnybrook Hospital for perinatal and infant loss. Okay. And she has her own stories about that. And my work, my career was with infants and children with disabilities. So these kinds of things are very near and dear to my heart. Mm-hmm. So they have a picnic every year. They release butterflies, and they have a raffle for a quilt that I send to them. Their colors are purple and their flowers lavender for remembrance. So it's fun to play with those two ideas. My local hospital is doing a fundraiser for their neonatal intensive care unit. So I met a young mom on social media who was doing some additional fundraising for that run, and I made a quilt for her. They're often, I don't know, many charities have some medical relationship, and I know somebody. Okay. So, for cancer, for ALS, for the hospitals. Oh, one of my favorite programs, I used to work for the municipal government. And our paramedic do a charity donation of quilts to seniors who are in hospital at Christmas. Okay. It's called nanny blankets. Nice. So that's been a favorite one to do. And I've been very sad that because of the pandemic, they haven't done it for a couple of years. So this year they're going to get 3 because it's sitting on my shelf waiting for them.
And so if there's people out there that are wanting to start into this kind of work, doing t-shirt work and doing memory quilts and supporting people who are like, I guess what I'm wondering is, are you making a quilt just out of your own stash, or are you talking with them and getting paired with somebody who is wanting to have a memory quilt made for them?
Both of those things happen, all kinds of
Okay.
those combinations. Often a charity quilt will be seen by somebody who will then think about their own memory quilt that they want.
Okay.
So those connections happen all the time. We are a big part of the music community. So a lot of musicians and artists have their stack of t-shirts that they want. So that happens.
Yeah.
The circles just keep going on. One of the musicians we know is also a funeral director.
Okay.
So, and one of his colleagues lost her mom and wanted wanted memory quilts for her grandchildren. So that was an interesting project because I think I made 6 quilts out of grandmother's clothing, but the person who requested them didn't ask for a quilt for herself. Lucky for me, there were enough leftovers that I could do that and gift that to her because it was her mom. And I lost my mom, well, long ago now, but it didn't feel so long ago. And there's healing for me in this because when I lost my mom, I didn't do memory quilts and nobody thought of it. And her clothes just went. Mm-hmm. And I wish I had them. I wish I had some of them.
Yeah.
So that was healing for me too, to be able to gift that to someone else.
That's a really, really beautiful story. I can relate to that a lot because my mother passed as well. And I didn't save her stuff. And she actually was a quilter, and I got a lot of her fabric as well, and a lot of her sewing store. And I was at a point in my life where I just couldn't deal with the volume of stuff that I had. So I actually gave a lot of it away. And in some ways, I wish I'd kept more. I have a stash of blocks that she made. And one of these days I will put together, because she taught quilting and she taught me quilting. So one of these days I will get to that stash of quilt blocks and I will make the quilt I want to make with that. But I haven't gotten there quite yet. But and again, it's that healing of
Yes.
That personal healing of the loss that you're dealing with, and kind of each stitch helps that, right?
Absolutely. I wonder what she would think of where my quilting has taken me now. She supported my sewing and my quilting 100%. She gave me a sewing machine when I came to Toronto from home that she hated and had tension issues and was a big pain in the butt, but it's still in the family.
Yeah.
People still use it. And I think of her when I sit down at the machine regularly. Yeah. It was hard for me to quilt after I lost her. I took some time when it was just too sad to think about sewing.
That's an interesting thing that happens, right? Like, and I think that's, as quilters, we also feel like quilting is supposed to be what heals us, and quilting is supposed to be what makes us get through these hard times. But I think that as humans, we also need to give ourselves space to get to that point where it will be healing, because at first, sometimes it's just too painful, actually. Yes. And I've been through my own set of losses where I have a deep understanding of that.
Before she died, my mother gave me a quilt that my grandmother had made.
Nice.
And I said to her, why was she giving me this quilt? It belonged to my sister, who's only 15 months younger than me. And my mother said, oh, no, this was not your sister's quilt. You only can remember seeing it because you were so little when it went to her. But your grandmother made this for you. So I have that quilt. It needs so much repair, and it's applique, which is not yet solidly in my skill set.
It's not in your wheelhouse yet.
Not yet, but I do have some reproduction fabrics from the 50s that I think will do it justice.
Nice.
And then there's one more generation back.
Another connection.
Where quilting matters.
And so when you're making your quilts, are you using any particular designs? Is it abstract? Is it just generic geometrics? What are you doing with the quilt patterns?
Often it depends on what the customer has in mind. And I like to work closely with the customer to say, what is your vision? What do you see? Sometimes they have an idea, sometimes they don't.
Okay.
It is a really big design challenge when you have 3 t-shirts that are red and the rest are gray and blue. Or, you have grandmother's clothing and it's everything from soup to nuts. And to try and find a way to make it, for me, a design of anything, that's what takes time.
Yeah.
But I enjoy that process now because I know something will come in the end. I start cutting and lay the fabrics out and wait for them to give me some kind of idea about what might work with what. And I mean, I'm not so mystical or anything that I think that they speak to me, but there's something about the process and the fabrics themselves that just, if you play with it long enough, something will evolve. And I usually am quite happy with the results, but it's hard work.
Yeah. No, I can see that the creation and design phase is often some of the hardest part, and the actual construction is fairly quick, and that's just straight sewing, and you can put that together.
Once you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
But even not knowing how big the pieces can be, because sometimes it's a large logo on a t-shirt and sometimes it's just up in one corner. And so how are you going to bring that little piece into these bigger pieces?
And are you often doing just fairly straight geometric squares, or are you doing more like crazy quilting, or just trying to get an idea of visually what they look like?
All of the above. Of the above. Sometimes I remember I did one for a woman whose daughter graduated from Laurentian University. So their colors are purple and gold, which I really love. And she gave me shorts and sweatshirts and t-shirts and even an undershirt, I think. So I had all different sizes. So that was very much a crazy quilt. But some of the pieces were big enough that I could cut pieces, half squares, to make pinwheels and other things to put into that design, because nothing was square. Nothing was the same size. Nothing fit together.
Of course.
But that was one of my favorite ones to finish too. At the very end, I was almost done and the client said, by the way, my daughter's gay. And so can you put something rainbow in there? And I thought, oh my goodness, I have gold and purple here. What am I going to do? And found a way to do it. And the daughter was thrilled that her mother acknowledged that awesome piece of her university story.
Yeah, the stories behind quilts is really quite fascinating to hear the process people go through and what it is that they envision and need emotionally from the quilt.
Yes.
Yeah.
And is it just going to keep you warm, or is it going to be displayed on the back of your couch, or is it something you want to pass to your children? Or lots of times parents have asked me to make these quilts for their sons and daughters as they graduate high school or they graduate university. A young woman played competitive hockey, and hockey jerseys are big things. So that's hard to do anything interesting with. Yeah. But her mother sent me a video when she arrived at university. She hung that quilt on her wall.
Oh, that's awesome.
And another friend of mine has 3 sons who played hockey, and they all played in the same leagues, and all the shirts were black and red, and oh my goodness. But during COVID, one of them was attending university classes on Zoom, and he hung his behind him as his backdrop.
Nice.
Yeah. So it had its purpose. There was pride there.
I want to thank you for sharing some of these stories with me. I have a couple more questions still. Do you work mostly on a domestic sewing machine? Do you do a lot of quilting in your work?
I have a very small brother domestic machine, and that's it.
Okay.
And so I do a machine quilt on this machine. I have machine quilted kings.
Oh,
it is a big challenge, and I don't do it often. I've just finished a king size top for my youngest son and his wife, and I think maybe I'll hand quilt the middle because that's easier to maneuver.
Okay.
And machine quilt the edges is sort of where I'm leaning.
What do you use for batting and backing materials?
Again, whatever anybody may like. I love to put flannel on the backs of quilts because it's Canada and it's cold. But sometimes people, especially for the t-shirt quilt, sometimes people want fleece. I'll use cotton if that's what they want. People have all kinds of ideas about what they might like. I like to use flannel, but I'll use cotton if it has the pattern and fabric. And sometimes it doesn't matter so much, the back. Yeah. Sometimes I put pieces from the front on the back, the leftover t-shirts that wouldn't fit. I did a graduation one recently. A young woman had graduated university. Her mother is from Ghana and brought me her own mother's wedding suit and a suit of her father's to incorporate into this quilt, as well as her daughter's things. And she brought me her daughter's grade 8 graduation sash.
Oh, wow.
And I couldn't cut it. I couldn't cut into it pieces. So I applicated on the back.
Nice.
So we could keep the whole thing in its shape. So yeah, the backs, I have fun with the backs too. They're not always plain Jane.
Yeah, no, it's nice to have those second stories on the back.
Yeah. Sometimes they're a little secret, right? Because you don't see them so often.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. You talked to me a little bit about rag quilts that you do. Tell me more about that.
Rag quilts are not so possible to do with t-shirts because t-shirts don't rag.
Right. They don't fray.
They just roll. They don't fray. But I have done rag quilts with leftover flannel too. There's always lots of flannel in my stores, and baby blankets or receiving blankets often get made into rag quilt. So this is how thrifty we are in this family. 2 of my children have recently had babies and elected to use cloth diapers.
Okay.
2 of the older babies use cloth diapers. So my daughter, who's also sews really well, brought me a bag full of diaper making supplies. But in there were really old and tattered receiving blankets. So they're now the middle of diapers.
Okay, that's good. reuse when you can.
Reuse.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes rag quilts can be fun because you have little tiny pieces that you can stitch on the front and then rag those little pieces. So you have designs within designs.
Nice.
So you can really use it all.
Yeah.
That's where I use my leftover batting too, because you only need a little square.
Right. Of course. You can piece those together. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. That makes total sense. So if somebody was wanting to get in touch with you, how would they go about getting in touch with you if they wanted to do a memory quilt?
Social media is the best bet. I do have a quilting page on Facebook. My business is Silver Soul Quilts.
Okay.
They can certainly just contact me. I'm on Instagram too, Cathy Sings 26. You can find me if you look on social media. Okay. That's the best way.
Okay. Well, I'll link that into the show notes as well for sure, so people can find you.
And as you can tell, I'm happy to talk about it with anyone who cares to listen.
Yeah, it's so good. I love your enthusiasm for it and the kindness and caring that you approach the conversation with, and the understanding that you have for the emotion and the healing that has to happen around, especially for a quilt that's for a loss in a family. And you approach that very, very respectfully. And I really like that.
That's very kind of you to say. And I'm very glad it shows.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah. So thank you so much for being here.
Can I tell you, I'm very proud so I sew on a custom table. My machine is inset into my table that I bartered with a friend of mine who does emergency response work. At the beginning of COVID, I started to do emergency response work. And I happened to see a picture. Someone said they just finished making file cabinets. And I said, "You're a woodworker, you make file cabinets?" He said, "Yep." I said, "I'm looking for a custom sewing table." And he looked at me and he said, "Are you a quilter?" And I said, "Yes, actually I am." He said, "I have carried a tub of my wife's t-shirts back and forth across the country twice. I will make you a custom table if you will make me a t-shirt quilt." Of course, amazing. I said yes.
Amazing. Yes, of course you said yes.
This is a piece of old maple, and the legs of this table are from an antique treadle sewing machine.
Amazing.
So reuse, recycle, absolutely. So
Repurposing.
I made that t-shirt quilt. He gave me so many t-shirts. I had to make it double-sided. It was an awesome project.
Awesome.
But the sister of that woman, so his mother-in-law, said, we love that quilt so much you made for our daughter. We want you to make one for our other daughter. She lives in Scotland.
Okay.
So one of my t-shirt quilts is in Scotland.
There you go. You're an international quilter now.
I felt that was such a great story to be able to tell.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. Yeah. And it's just great getting these connections. And it's so neat that you've got, like, have you logged all of these connections? Do you know where all of these people are, where your quilts are now?
I do keep a spreadsheet of everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know pretty much where things are. Pretty much.
I wanted to also ask, this is a question I've been wanting to ask my guests coming on. What are you reading right now?
Oh, goodness. So I read all of the time. I listen to audiobooks when I'm quilting.
Okay. Yeah.
And I have just finished The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie.
Nice.
Nothing about quilting, but it's
That's
a
okay.
mystery story. The heroine is 11 years old in 1950 in England, and she's a chemist.
Oh, cool.
So she solves the mystery with chemistry.
That's amazing.
I read murder mysteries. I read historical fiction. Put a book in front of me and probably I'll read it.
Awesome.
I very rarely give up.
Awesome. I'm going to look up that title and figure out the author, and I'll include that in the notes as well. It's okay. You don't have to think of it. I'll figure it out.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for your time today. I really, really enjoyed talking to you. Some great stories and some great ideas around, well, first of all, around circularity when you're doing bartering and using up older materials and reuse, but also just this really special conversation around the memory quilts and the impact they have on helping people heal through loss. Yeah, that's really lovely.
I love to do them for that reason.
Yeah.
They're a challenge. They're a design challenge. Working with a variety of fabrics is a challenge, but the end result is always, always, always worth it. Always. I don't have a big audience to share some of this stuff with. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk about what I love to do with someone who knows about it and is interested in some of these side pieces, that side angles, the extra bits and pieces.
It's not just about the end product. Yeah.
Oh, no, it rarely is about the end product for me. My quilts would never make it in a show. And I don't have it. One of them did, but I really don't have any. That's not my purpose. That's not my purpose.
No.
My purpose is function.
Yeah.
Absolutely function. I want it to be used. Please don't put it in the cupboard and leave it alone.
Yeah. Yeah. You want it to be loved and have its meaning brought out with use rather than a visual.
Can I tell you one more story?
Absolutely.
A young woman is a weaver and dyes fabrics. And she very much holistic in her life and made for herself a baby wrap. Okay. But she found the fabric was too loose to be effective as a baby wrap. But she had 5 yards or something of this narrow fabric in beautiful rainbow colors that she had made. And she couldn't use it for its purpose. So she brought it to me and said, can you make this into a quilt? And I said, well, it's a very loose weave fabric. And she said, I have an idea. How do you feel about applique? And I said, that's not my thing. She said, but I have this idea of cutting this baby wrap into flowers and appliquing the flowers onto squares. And I said, well, if they're pretty simple and I can do it by machine, let me try. So I made a king size quilt of this batiks that I had in fat quarters that I cut into squares, and then I cut all these flowers out individually and appliqued them on top. So she ended up joining the needlework guild that my daughter belonged to, not far from here. And they had a quilt show. And she asked my daughter if she could display this quilt that she hadn't made. She had made the fabric that were the flowers.
Right.
And so they talked about it at the guild and decided they could display it. And my daughter invited me to go to this quilt show and didn't tell me that my quilt was going to be on display. So I walked into this curling arena, wherever up way far from here, walked around, and there it was staring me in the face. And I cried and cried and cried because I did not design it to be entered in any quilt show. I didn't belong to that guild at all. But that was a tribute from the woman that I had made the quilt.
That is amazing. That's so fun. That must have been, it just kind of fills you with your own sense of pride, right? That somebody appreciates what you've done enough to want to display it like that.
Exactly right. Exactly right. It was fun. That was one of those moments that, this is why I quilt. Not that I had any idea it was going to happen, but there it happened.
So that was the end of that conversation with Cathy Saul. What a great way to look at sustainability through the idea of, first of all, being able to feed her joy and giving to people the way she does. She obviously gets so much out of it, but it also is really steeped in, she has like a core belief of sustainability and recycling, upcycling, repurposing throughout all of the things in her life, clearly. And that's pretty exciting to see. And I really appreciate her sharing those stories. If you like what you're hearing on the podcast, I would love it if you would like it, share it, and tell your friends all about it. If you want to help support the podcast, you can go to my website and there is a support the podcast button and you can pay what you want in terms of a donation. You can buy me a cup of tea because I don't drink coffee. So buy me a cup of tea and help support the podcast and offset some of the costs that come with running this podcast. Thanks for joining us this week and we'll see you next time. If you're interested in a community that engages with sustainability in quilting and textiles, you can join the Learning Hub at BridgetO'Flaherty.com. There you will find memberships, online courses, supplies, and resources for sustainability and my textile art. You can also book me to speak with or teach your group. You can find me on social media at The Sustainable Quilter. Don't forget to comment, like, and share, and to follow me on your favorite podcast app so you won't miss an episode. Thanks for joining me, and I'm so excited to share this journey with you. Until next time, happy stitching.